Our next speaker is Dr. Carey Molberg, class of 1963. And the title of his talk is Fun in Fitness After 50. Carey Molberg graduated from the U of S College of Medicine in 1963, received the silver medal in pediatrics, and then completed his FRS-PC in pediatrics in 1971. He was in general practice in Fort Churchill, Manitoba from 1966 to 68, and in Red Deer, Alberta from 1975 to 2013. Dr. Molberg. I should have introduced myself to you sooner. I'll get you some water.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I have nothing to disclose. I hope everyone will be able to stay awake. One of my memories from medical school is that the first hour of lectures after lunch was pretty devastating, and especially if it was radiology. I would like to express appreciation for the medical education I received here. It made it possible for me to have a satisfying and fulfilling career. I would also like to express my appreciation for Dr. John Gerard, who passed away recently. He was a great role model. I have been asked to give this talk to help focus on the desirability of achieving and maintaining good physical fitness. I am speaking from the point of view of one who graduated 50 years ago. I don't pretend to be a great athlete or an expert on physical conditioning, but I do have an interest in the subject and a desire to be physically fit. I would like to discuss some things that have helped improve my fitness, some enjoyable things that I've been able to do because of being more fit, some hazards and medical issues that I've experienced while exercising, and some benefits of being more fit. I would also like to give a brief tribute to someone who has had a great influence on me. 3 things happened in the 90s that have had a very positive effect on my fitness level. The first was the decision that I should have a medical checkup, which revealed that I had an elevated serum cholesterol. I purchased a hybrid bike, began riding, drummed up all the dietary information I could muster, including seeing a dietitian, and my wife Myrna and I tried to follow all the best recommendations. Whole grains, low-fat dairy products. Here we have oats and ground flax with low-fat milk, and this makes a good breakfast. And I must say I was very impressed with today's breakfast. It really fit well. Next, lots of vegetables and fish, especially salmon. Here we have sweet potato, spinach, cabbage salad, and salmon. Water rather than sweetened drinks. Beans and lentils are also nutritious. It is recommended that we not eat a lot of red meat, processed foods, or fast foods. A variety of fresh fruit with low-fat yogurt, nuts, and a little chocolate sauce makes a good dessert. I missed the apple fritters at first, but for the most part I have enjoyed our new diet. I didn't think I was obsessive about food and said as much at a family gathering. However, a fit of coughing from the direction of the youngest child caused me to think that maybe I was somewhat obsessive, not only about food, but likely about a number of things. However, for diet and exercise, perhaps some obsessiveness may be helpful. I am a pediatrician, and a lot of children that I see are overweight and obese, and I advise them about diet and exercise, and I have wanted to be very diligent in doing everything I was advising them to do. The second thing that happened was that my wife read in the Reader's Digest about that brisk walking was good for trimming some weight off. That was timely because our older son was getting married and she wanted to look her best as mother of the groom. I was pleased to join her in walking, but she took the advice very seriously in both speed and distance. And it was a strain for me to keep up with her, and after one particularly fast walk, I had leg pain due to Achilles tendonitis. I went to an athletic shoe store, got better walking shoes, saw the family doctor, and got referred for physiotherapy. However, after several months and many physiotherapy treatments. I was no better and was still limping with pain. I then went to a highly recommended athletic therapist, and she prescribed stretching exercises, but more importantly, she gave many treatments consisting of digging her fingertips into my leg to separate the gastrocnemius tendon from the soleus tendon, which she said had become fused together by the inflammation of the tendinitis. Her treatments were painful but effective, resulting in a complete cure over a period of 2 months, and I haven't had any difficulty since. We have continued with frequent brisk walking most days, and this has contributed to general fitness and well-being. The third thing that happened during the 60s was a request from an old friend, Dr. Hugh McClure, to sponsor him for a Canadian Bible Society fundraising bike ride in the Rocky Mountains called Bike for Bibles, 700 to 800 kilometers over 7 days. He was 80 years old at the time, began doing the arduous ride at age 75, and went annually for 10 years. I had first met Dr. McClure in Sierra Leone, where he was a British government doctor during the Second World War, and later a missionary doctor in a remote village. And there's Dr. McClure in a big outdoor clinic. He was a very talented man as an author, an artist, a musician, a linguist, and Bible translator. He later practiced in a few Canadian communities and eventually retired in Edmonton. After sponsoring him a couple of times for Bike for Bibles, I decided if he could do that ride in his 80s, I should be able to do it in my 60s. I went on 4 such rides, usually about 100 kilometers each day, but one day coming out of the Rockies Crow's Nest Pass on our way to Calgary, we had a tailwind and rode for 200 kilometers. Appetites were huge and fluid requirements great, and sports drinks with electrolytes and sugar were a must, as without them one faded badly. Riding each day for 7 days with a group of 30 congenial and enthusiastic riders through wonderful scenery was a great experience. Vigorous training was required, and there was a learning curve. The first bike I had was a hybrid and was not durable enough for such long distance use, so I purchased a good road bike, which has served faithfully. Good equipment is important. There have been a few injuries and medical problems associated with bike riding. I fell a few times getting used to the clip-on pedals, and on one occasion I flew over the handlebars when I stopped too suddenly. Fortunately, there were no significant injuries. I found the ride over the Selkirk Mountains south of Rogers Pass from Nakusp to Balfour particularly difficult. At the end, I realized I had carpal tunnel syndrome in both hands, with typical numbness and weakness. I'm not sure just what happened to things there, yeah. I was pleased to have no further deterioration on the ride back to Calgary, and my work was not significantly affected. My main problems were not having enough strength in my right hand to turn the key of the car motor to start it, and I was unable to tie an OR mask behind my neck. It took 6 months for the symptoms to resolve. One year I joined the BC group on a 1-week ride starting in Kamloops. After an arduous 160-kilometer ride from Kelowna to Princeton, I noticed a slight loss of lateral peripheral vision in my right eye. I wasn't sure what to do, but I continued the ride back to Kamloops over the next 2 days and then drove back to Red Deer. 5 days late after the onset, there had been no deterioration, and I was in the hands of an Edmonton retinal consultant. Around that time, a new pediatrician joined our pediatric group in Red Deer. He and his wife are Jewish, and they invited my wife and me for a special Sabbath meal. I was explaining to his wife about the occurrence of a partial retinal detachment, and that the retinal surgeon had treated it by injecting a special gas into the vitreous chamber. I said that initially after the injection I had no vision in that eye, but that vision was gradually returning, beginning at the top and moving downwards. For example, I said, "I can now see you only as far down as your chin." Her immediate response was, That should be fine, because that is only as far down as you should be looking anyway. My vision continued to improve, and I was left with a minimal lateral field defect. The retinal surgeon said that he didn't think the retinal detachment occurred because of exertion. 2 years ago, my daughter-in-law invited me to go on a 100-kilometer ride called the Tour de Liberta, which takes place in some French communities north of Edmonton. On the last day of the Tour de France, I was pleased to agree. However, 19 days before the ride, I was riding with my grandchildren when our 7-year-old granddaughter, who's very competitive, she tried to pass me on a narrow sidewalk just at the end of the ride so she could beat. I didn't see her coming, and we collided, and down we went. Fortunately, she escaped with almost no injury. However, I found that when I wanted to have a drink, I couldn't pick up a glass. The emergency physician diagnosed gamekeeper's thumb, or skier's thumb, which is injury to the ulnar collateral ligament of the thumb. He applied a splint, which I was to leave in place for 6 weeks. I also found that with walking I had knee pain and thought that would rule out the 100-kilometer ride. I once again consulted my athletic therapist, and she diagnosed a meniscus injury. She said I should train as usual for the 100-kilometer ride because bike riding is good when there's a meniscus damage, but that I should avoid walking for a week and a half. I resumed training and did the 100 kilometers in good time and was able to go mountain climbing. A couple weeks later, this is Arnica Lake by Storm Mountain near Castle Junction in Banff Park. I did this hike with Bert McBride, and he was the one to volunteer me for this talk. The most recent adventure began last year when a friend invited me to hike the 75-kilometer West Coast Trail on Vancouver Island from Port Renfrew to Bamfield. Although I had never previously gone on an overnight hike, I immediately accepted the invitation and started training. It turned out that I should have discussed that with my wife first, but she agreed anyway. My accountant said he trained for that hike by walking up the stairs to the top of his 8-story office building every day before and after work. I tried it, and the first time I had to stop on the 6th floor to catch my breath, but after that I was able to do it without difficulty. The hospital stairs were a similar distance, so I proceeded to climb them regularly, going up and down as many as 4 or 5 times after work. I think this was very important training because there are as many as 70 ladders on the trail, some of them 30 feet tall. I have heard of hikers taking nitroglycerin before starting up. Training also included walking with increasing backpack weight, climbing steep hills where possible. The leader had good advice about equipment, and the hike went well. I did have one fall on the first day on a particularly steep part and found myself rolling helplessly downward, but after a few rotations was stopped by a well-placed log, for which I gave credit to my guardian angel. After that, I was more careful, with greater respect for the hazards of the trail. About 1% of hikers require medical evacuation, and this amounts on average to 1 every 2nd day. Most of these are for sprains or fractures, but 10% are for hypothermia. Most evacuations are by boat, but those that require urgent care are by helicopter. Hypothermia is a definite risk, especially in the evening or at night. The wind off the ocean tends to be cool. Average temperature in July is 14 degrees Celsius. One night, as I was sleeping, as I was in my sleeping bag preparing to go to sleep, I began shivering. I took that as an early sign of hypothermia. I reached around in the dark tent for something to put on my head, and soon I stopped shivering and went to sleep. In the morning, I discovered that my headpiece was the pair of undershorts I had worn for the last 2 days of hiking. So much for my sense of smell. Actually, wet wipes are really good for a bath on a trip like that. One day, when I removed my gaiters, I noticed my legs were covered with red spots. These were most likely caused by no-see-ums, or biting midges, which are common on sandy coasts. They lasted about a week but didn't bother me much. Some people get an intense allergic pruritus. DEET is supposed to be effective in preventing bites. The scenery along the coast is great, and there were significant wildlife sightings, but no bears or cougars. We caught this heron having lunch. Several bald eagles were seen. A large pod of orca whales passed by one day. An island covered with seals was nearby. These fine telephoto shots were taken by a dental student, Courtney Dirksen, who carried a digital camera with a very long lens on the whole hike, and you can see it there. And that, you can see, that's part of the path there. This helicopter was stationed near a lighthouse, ready to respond to emergencies. One of the campsites was located near Susiat Falls. We got to hike the shelf, what's called the shelf, solid rock shore, and race the tide to Sandstone Creek. Jump off the shelf down to the mouth of the creek, and then walk up the creek bed. Water was shallow and the creek bed was solid rock. There were some board rocks, but you had to be careful because they were frequently in disrepair. This is one of the many ladders. Sometimes a rung was missing. The whole hike was enjoyable, and I was very thankful to arrive at the end intact. Maintaining fitness at an older age needs to be a priority to be effective, with something fairly vigorous almost on a daily basis. For me, this has consisted of vigorous cycling in the summer, vigorous skating, as vigorous I can do at my age anyway, vigorous skating in the winter, plus walking frequently, using stairs instead of elevators, walking or cycling to the store or bank. There are many other ways that to get this exercise, but it is very much preferable if it is something that one enjoys, or it's not likely to be maintained. These activities can even be rather addictive, with some irritability developing if they do not occur. Working at fitness is time-consuming, and with busy lives can be difficult to make a priority. One impediment to fitness is all the labor-saving devices at our disposal, from the remote for the TV to escalators, elevators, snow blowers, golf carts, and the ever-ready vehicles. We live in the relatively small city of Red Deer and are 2 to 4 kilometers from most businesses we frequent. Walking or riding a bicycle takes a little extra time, but is a good way to deal with many of these trips. What are the benefits of all this effort? There's a long list of medical conditions that are less likely to occur, and we heard about those this morning. One feels better and sleeps better. Every part of the body seems to function better. It doesn't seem to help my hearing, though. One has more energy. Weight gain is avoided. It decreases stress and improves one's mood. It's a good way to have a good time with peers. There is the opportunity to take part in many enjoyable but vigorous activities with children, grandchildren, and other younger folk, and maintain a reasonable pace with them. My wife and I have 9 grandchildren, and while I think it is important for us to keep fit ourselves, it is probably even more important to instill in our children and grandchildren the importance of good nutrition and an active lifestyle, and it is so much more effective if we do these things with them. It is very gratifying to receive a postcard like this from a 7-year-old grandchild. I like the bike riding we do in the summer. There is no doubt that many of you do much more than I have described. However, I hope this is helpful to focus on things we can do to help us be fit, and I don't think it will be successful unless what we are doing is fun. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Molberg. Is there any questions? Are there any questions? It was wonderful.
This is more of a comment than is a question, but I think you've given us lots of reasons and lots of good pictures as to why fitness is good for us. But for those of us who are a bit of doubters, I was surfing the net just recently and came across something in Medscape. It was, I don't remember which journal it was, but the study was the Copenhagen Heart Study. I don't know if anybody has read it or heard about it, but in the Copenhagen Heart Study, there were over 15,000 people, and I believe 17,000 were runners. And what the results showed, taking into consideration all confinders in terms of age and diseases and so on and so forth, the people who ran on a regular basis, the men lived approximately 3.8 years longer than their cohort who didn't exercise, and women had an advantage of approximately 4.5 years of living longer in relationship to their cohorts. So I think anybody who needs more evidence to say that fitness is good, I think that's a very good study.
Thank you very much, and I think during that time you're enjoying it more too.
Yes.
No more questions? Thank you very much. It was a wonderful talk and fit in beautifully with what we discussed this morning.
Thank you. I wonder if I could just add one more thing. I recently came across this book, Younger Next Year, which talks about a lot of the same things that I've been trying to do, even more so. It's written by a retired lawyer and his internist physician. And it was very interesting reading anyway, and I think if someone wants to do this seriously, it would be worthwhile. Okay. Thank you.